Okay, so my dear friends, a very happy morning, Nana. Thank you for joining the session. So today what we shall do is, today is the last session, right? Today what we shall do is, first let us see the amendments of this subject, whatever the amendments which are introduced for May 2021, which will continue to be there for November 2021 as well. And thereafter, whatever the 2 or 3 flowcharts left over, we will see at the fag end of the class. Let's start with the amendments right immediately. My dear friends, you have to remember one thing. Whenever institute says amendment, obviously it is very, very important for the examination. Whatever subject it is, whenever there is an amendment, definitely a minimum of 5 to 10 marks can be expected out of that amendment itself. So for the past 20-30 classes, whatever we have discussed, that is all one set. But whereas this class alone, whatever the next 1.5 hours, 2 hours of discussion we're going to make, that this class alone is quite more important. The reason being, since these are amendments, there is a high chance of testing from these areas. And it happens usually, that is what is usual habit of the institute. They keep testing the amendments more and more when compared to the aspects which are already present in the syllabus. So let me share the amendments material. What I will do is, immediately after this class, I will upload this material on the blog as well. I will upload this material on the blog as well so that you guys can download it from there. Almost like a material of 15 pages is there, but however, since I covered some existing topic as well for establishing the connection properly, it is coming to those many pages. But ideally, 4 or 5 page amendments are there this time. Okay, I hope you guys are able to see it now. Now we're gonna see the amendments from the chapter number 1 first. My dear friends, before seeing the amendments, I hope you guys remember what is chapter number 1. So chapter number 1 was about automation of business processes. If you guys remember, these were the areas, or we divided the entire chapter into 3 parts. First part was about business process automation. What do you mean by business process? What benefits do you get if you automate a process? What are the 4 factors to be considered while automating a process? Or like what are the steps involved in automating a process? If you remember, I spoke to you with an example of Spaloon, like, you know, what examples, what are all the methods by which we need to automate the process and all we discussed over there. Do you guys remember that example? I mean, Spaloon, through which we discussed the business process automation.
Yes, sir. We remember, sir.
Yeah, Nana. So there, in the same topic, I mean, the same business process automation related stuff, they have introduced two new topics, Nana. 2 new topics. Which business process should be automated, and what are the challenges involved in business process automation? These are the 2 new areas. Apart from these existing topics which are there on the left-hand side, these 2 new areas have been introduced. Which business processes should be automated, and what are the challenges involved in that BPA? So these are the 2 new topics. Let us start with the first topic. What is the first topic? Which business processes should be automated? If you take any organization, there will be n number of business processes, correct? We have seen already P2P process, O2C process, HR process, fixed asset process, general ledger process. There are so many processes inside the organization. Which one do you think is most suitable for automation? Let me say you. I'll say you one process, Nana. I'll say you one process. You say me with your common sense, which process? I'll say you 2 examples. You say me with your common sense, which process do you think is better to automate? For example, let us take our organization itself. Ours is a CA firm, right? Ours is a CA firm. So in our organization itself, I'll say you which process is better to automate. Okay. I'm saying you first process. Whenever customer comes and purchases some service with us, whenever customer comes and purchases, a customer can come for income tax filing, a customer can come for GST filing, a customer can come for anything like, you know, internal audit or statutory audit or anything. Whenever customer comes and purchases a service, we need to issue an invoice to the customer. So you know the invoice format, right? You know, at the top we will write our company name, and then thereafter we will write our GSTN number, our SIN number, our PAN number, our bank account number, and all these things. Then we will also mention what is the item which we purchased. Let's say GST filings. How much are we charging? Let's say 30,000 rupees. And how much is any service will have GST, right? CGST or SGST or IGST, whatever it is. We need to calculate that if the customer is from the same state, I need to enter the CGST, SGST. If the customer is from different state, I need to calculate the GST at the rate of 18%. Totally it completely. I need to send this invoice to the customer along with a payment link. So customer will click on that payment link, will make this payment to me. So this is one process, Nana, where there is so much of information needs to be entered manually and all. Per annum, if you see, or per month, if you see, we keep raising invoices approximately some 10,000 invoices, 10,000 invoices per month. You know, like many customers are there, so they keep on coming again and again for different services. So we keep on raising 10,000 invoices every month. There is also another process. There is also second process in our entity where if a customer signs up for income tax notice reply, our customers are there, right? They might get some income tax notices. Now and then they'll keep receiving income tax notices. If I need to exactly say monthly, there will be 10 notices minimum. Monthly, there will be 10 notices, 10 to 20 notices will be there. Notice will come under different section. Sometimes it comes under section 157. Sometimes it comes under section 143A, 143(1)A. Each section is different over here. Sometimes for cash deposits, they will get a notice. Sometimes for non-payment of TDS, they will get a notice. Sometimes for delayed filing of return, they will get a notice. Sometimes for excess cash transactions, they will get a notice. For each different sections. In this way, approx 100 different sections are there under Income Tax Act from which I can get notice. 100 different sections are there. Different sections are there in income tax, because of which I can receive a notice. And whatever people will do, usually what they will do, they will sit and manually read the notice, under which section it has been sent, for which customer it has been sent, what is the issue which they have explained in the notice, what are the documents they are asking for. Usually in the notice, income tax department, it's kind of a love letter. You come and visit me is what they will mention along with the time and all. And they will also say, while coming, you bring these list of documents. So what are the documents? Based on that, what our people will do is, they will analyze that section. They will go to the Google or like we use this website called India Kanun. They'll go to this particular website, indiakanun.org, which actually summarizes all case laws for all acts. We will go and search such kind of sections. So let's say I received a section notice under 143(1)A, 143(2) notice, 143(2) notice. There will be various scenarios for which it has been sent and various case laws relating to that. I will identify which case law is more relevant to me, or how can I present my case to the officer. Accordingly, I will draft a letter to the officer. We are from so and so company, and you have sent us notice with the so and so notice number, and with this particular date, with this particular number. See, I have identified 35 different case laws where whatever the mistake which you identified is not at all a mistake. For example, he is saying you need to pay tax on the securities premium received. I will collect some 35 different case laws from different places, and I will say according to these cases, there is no need to pay tax on the securities premium is what I will go and submit it to the officer. Now this letter drafting is there, right? For each notice, it will take at least 1 day of time for a person to draft a letter. For one person to draft a letter, one good chartered accountant or at least a good semi-qualified chartered accountant should sit and then should draft this particular letter. Now let's come to the automation. First process is there, which is invoicing process, which is being repeated 10,000 times in a month. 10,000 times in a month. Second process is there, which is monthly sending reply to the 10 notices of income tax department. This is also another process. Logically speaking, which one do you think is easy to automate? First process or second process? First process. First process, you can prepare your entire invoice system. Just select what filings you want to do or what service you want to sign up for. How much is the amount? GST calculation. Rest of all the data can be automated. You can just send it within a single click. So first process is very simple to automate. First process is of high volume. First process is very less complex. First process requires a lot of controls as well, because nobody should raise an invoice for GST filings. We should charge a minimum of 2,000 rupees per month, but nobody should raise an invoice. For 500 rupees a month. 500. So there should be a control involved. All these kind of things are required for first process. Whereas second process, which requires a lot of intellectual capability and workflow is very, very complex here. It is not simple. You need to first understand. For example, if you want to automate this process, you should train the system in such a way that it should read the income tax notice. It should understand the sections from which a section this particular notice came. It should be able to read the issue. And after reading the issue, it should be able to go and browse for the relevant case law and then get that particular case law and then draft a letter for us. Do you think is it an easy automation or a difficult automation?
Difficult one.
Very, very difficult automation. See, for this automation, I'll say you, today if I manually prepare an invoice, for preparing each invoice, it takes approximately 20 minutes of time. It takes approximately 20 minutes of time. But if I automate this particular process, it will come down to less than 1 minute. It will come down to less than 1 minute. So now how many minutes I saved? 19 minutes I saved for 10,000 invoices in a month. 10,000 invoices in a month, which is 1,90,000 minutes, which is approximately equivalent to 19 employees. 19 employees would have been required if I need to raise 10,000 invoices manually. But now, because of this automation, 19 members, because each member will have 10,000 minutes in a month, approximately 10,000 minutes in a month, because we work for 6 hours in a day, we work for 24 hours, 24 days in a month, and each hour will have 60 minutes. So which means approximately 8,640, but okay, we work for, let's assume 8 hours a day. Then at the time, approximately, okay, we'll work for 7 hours a day. I'm sorry. So approximately 10,000 minutes, Nana. So 10,000 minutes we are saving for each person. I mean, like 1,90,000 minutes is equivalent to 19 persons. Each person, if you assume a salary of 25,000, we are saving 4,75,000 rupees cost in each and every month. That is the kind of benefit which we gonna derive from the first automation. Second automation, we are spending 1 day of time for each notice. In that way, we have how many notices per month? 10 notices per month and 60 minutes. Per day there are 7 hours and then 60 minutes. So in a month you are spending 4,200 minutes, which is equivalent to half a person's time limit, because one person will have 10,000 minutes in a month, half a person's time. Usually, even if you assume chartered accountant is working on it, let's say chartered accountant salary is 70,000 a month, we are saving 35,000 here, which is very, very lesser for the kind of complexity involved in this automation. Like you need to use machine learning, artificial intelligence and all for automating the second process. But ultimately, you're going to save the cost of 35,000 rupees. My dear friends, with the some amount of common sense, you say me now, which one is better? First process is better or second process is better for automation? Which process should I choose?
First process.
First process is better.
Obviously, first process I need to choose for automation. That is what they have explained here. Don't choose the process which doesn't provide you significant benefits. Don't choose very complex process which is very difficult to automate. Choose the processes which usually require more controls or more transparency or more audit trails. Such kind of process needs to be automated. Whereas where something which is like very complex and too much of intelligence is required, don't consider such kind of processes for automation and all. So which business process should be automated? Just let me read once. Technology is the enabler of business process automation. BPA offers many advantages to the business, but every business process is not a good fit for automation. Companies tend to automate those business processes that are time and resource consuming. Those that are subject to human error, whichever is subject to more human errors. And because if I leave this process manually, people will put CGST, SGST in the place of IGST, IGST in the place of CGST, SGST. They'll sometimes calculate GST at 5%. Sometimes they'll calculate at 18%. All these mistakes are possible. So during that point of time, we need to consider those kind of processes for automation. Okay, these are the detailed description. First, what are all the kind of processes we need to select? Process involving high volume of repetitive tasks. That is one thing which we need to automate. Income tax reply is not a repetitive task because each client's issue is a different thing. Each client's section is a different thing. So for that reason, that cannot be selected. Process involving high volume of tasks or repetitive tasks you need to automate. Process requiring multiple people to execute the task. For income tax return, I hardly needed one semi-qualified resource or one chartered accountant. But whereas for raising the invoices, I needed 10 people. So processes requiring multiple people to execute the task, we need to automate. Time sensitive processes. Customer is ready to make the payment. If I keep on preparing the billing, let's assume you went to the Saravana store. You are ready to make the payment. You are waiting in that cart, but you are taking too much amount of time to prepare the bill and all. Customer satisfaction will significantly get impacted. Other than that, time sensitive processes will be there. For example, online banking, railway ticket opening, such kind of processes and all. You cannot stand in a big queue and then wait over there. So during that point of time, it is better to automate such processes which are time sensitive, where customer prefers to happen those processes in a very short span of time. Processes involving need for compliance and audit trail, where a detailed audit trail, detailed controls are required. Instead of handling it manually, it is better to automate. The reason is when you automate it, transparency will come into the process. You can better control it. You can see now, because our invoice process is automated, I can generate a report every month. Who has generated how much invoice? Who has made how much amount of sale? For which service we are making a lot of sales? All these things I will be able to get complete report and picture because this process has been automated and in a proper way I'm getting the reports. Processes which are having significant impact on the other processes and systems, those things we need to automate. For example, if I don't raise my invoices properly, I'm a CFO. Whenever I'm giving invoices to my clients, if I don't raise invoices properly, the problem is my customer will not be able to take input tax credit. I will not be able to file GST returns properly. All these things are having multiple effects. It is all related to multiple departments and multiple effects. So for that reason, it is better to consider such kind of process where interrelationship between departments exist. So such kind of processes, it is better to automate communication of such process. For example, today, if you see in our office, what will happen is there is a close coordination between marketing team and sales team. There is a close coordination between marketing team and sales team. Marketing team responsible for advertisements, creating the brand, online posters. We are an online CFO, right? Online posters, online advertisements and all. They're responsible for creating it. They keep on doing marketing activities. And once they receive a lead, or for example, if any customer comes to our website, our customer will submit a phone number, right? He will search for a service. For example, let's say he needs FSSAI license, which is food license, I guess. He needs food license. Once there is food license, he can type his email ID and phone number here. Email ID, phone number, and state. He can read about that service whenever he likes it. He can type the email ID, phone number, and for which state he's coming from. He can make the payment of $499. That's it. Once this is done, immediately within 1 hour of time, within maximum, not even 1 hour, immediately this particular email ID and phone number will go into the queue, our organization sales team queue. This page and all is being maintained by the marketing team. But whenever customer enters the data, it will get into the sales team queue. It will get into the queue of sales team. Immediately, automatically, system uses something called as auto dialer. Earlier and all our salespeople, after receiving the inquiry, they used to type the number and then call the customer. Today, it is not required. He has to just keep headsets and then keep on waiting for the call. That's it. He has to wait for the call. Whenever the customer submits a request, system automatically makes the call to that particular person. System itself prioritizes which customer you need to call first, which customer you need to call next. All these things system itself prioritizes. System itself makes a call to the customer. Now, with all this, what has happened is, earlier when we used to receive 100 inquiries, we used to convert only 10 or 15 customers. Our conversion percentage used to be 10 or 15 customers. 100 inquiries, only 10-15 customers will ultimately pay. But today, out of 100 inquiries, we are able to convert approximately 32 to 35%. 32 to 35% of the customers, we are able to make sure that they are making the payment because sales team has become more and more efficient. Better coordination between marketing team and sales team. All these things help to step up to the next level in our organization. So that kind of processes we need to automate, Nana. Not simple and easy process. Not not like very rarely used process where manpower required is very, very low. Very complex workflow. Don't automate such kind of processes. These are all, this is the first topic. Are you guys with me? My dear friends, are you with me? Which business processes should be automated? We have discussed. Let's take up the second one. Challenges involved in business process automation. Automation is not going to be simple. Automation is always challenging. Even let's say raising this small invoices, n number of problems will be there. N number of problems will be there because we would have configured the things. A new service will come. We need to go to the technology department for making the change. It is not going to be simple. Once you automate, like for example, today my invoices are all automatically being raised with 18% GST. 18% GST. Suddenly Nirmala Sitharaman came and said only 5% GST applicable for CA services. Then obviously I need to change my entire system. Automation is not going to be very simple. So what are the challenges involved in automating a process? Automating redundant processes. Sometimes what people will do is they'll choose wrong process for doing the automation. It doesn't create any value for even after automation. Sometimes organizations start off automation project by automating the processes. They find it suitable for automation without considering whether such processes are necessarily create value. This is another problem, Anna. Like most of the times they will choose wrong processes for automation. Our people also, they will think they are extremely intelligent and they will take up very complex processes for automation. Something like income tax return reply, I told you, right? Because this provides a good challenge for the engineering team to solve. So they usually choose these kind of processes, which is very, very difficult to automate. In some other cases, some business processes and tasks require huge amount of tacit knowledge. Tacit knowledge means some sort of professional knowledge that cannot be easily established on the document. Because of experience it comes, because of knowledge it comes. Such kind of processes should not be selected for automation, but these guys would have selected those kind of processes. Defining a complex process. Like, BPA requires re-engineering of some business processes that require significant amount of time to be spent. Like those kind of processes don't choose for automation. Like if you choose, you will face huge challenges over there. Staff resistance. This is also another challenge for BPA. We like kept a huge amount of effort and automated the GST reconciliation process in our entity. We kept a huge amount of effort and then automated, but people are not ready to accept. People want to follow old method only because they say, sir, if I click a button and then getting entire information from GST website, I am not getting the feeling that I got the exact information, sir. So I'll continue to use the manual process only is what people say. That is another problem. Staff resistance. Implementation cost. We would have developed automation, but for implementing that automation, there will be cost sometimes. For example, let's say I have developed an automation which requires huge amount of computing capacity, or which requires, for example, our people, what do? Is they automated something called as GST registration process. GST registration process. Once I click a button, that's it. I need to wait here. Whatever the information which customer has submitted, automatically it will go and type in the website. It will go and type in the GST website. It will get furnished. But the problem is, at once only I can type one application. If I need to replicate this, the software, the backend software which they are using for this purpose is very costly. Again, I need to spend a huge amount of money if I need to automate this end to end. Implementation cost will be very high. Even though sometimes automation is developed, the problem will be implementation cost will be very high, because of which we may not use that automation. So these challenges will be there always for automation. Very simple topics, Nana. These are very two simple topics, because after understanding so many topics in BPA, reading these two topics is not very difficult. So the first one is, which business process should be selected? Which business process? Highly repetitive, highly manual involvement there. Audit trails are required. Time sensitive processes having significant impact on the other process, or where coordination is required. Such kind of processes you should select for automation. What are the challenges usually in business process automation? First one, automating redundant or useless processes, which really doesn't add value to the organization at all. Very complex, defining a complex process is very difficult. If people choose such kind of processes for automation, it will go for a failure. Staff resistance after developing the automation. Implementation cost is very high after developing the automation. That is a problem. We developed, I told you, right? We developed the automation for raising the invoice, raising the bills. If customer sends a scan copy of bill, I can upload into my accounting software. My accounting software will automatically pass the entry. For passing each invoice, for reading that each invoice, we need to spend approximately 2 rupees. For reading that each invoice, we need to spend approximately 2 rupees. Because of which, again, this technology is not being used by us. Again and again, we are trying to optimize it. Again and again, we are trying to optimize it. We are not able to use even though the technology is ready, because we will end up spending approximately 2 rupees for each invoice for passing that. Implementation cost is very high. Implementation cost is very high, because of which sometimes automation won't become successful. My dear friends, are you with me? Are you guys with me now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, part 1, chapter 1, automation of business processes we have seen. Part 2, what is the new addition? Let us see. Okay. Part 2, what has happened is, part 2 is risk related terms, ERM, SA 315. So these kind of topics, right? In part 2, these are all the various topics which we already saw. Risk related terminologies. We understood what do you mean by vulnerability, what do you mean by asset, what do you mean by threat, what do you mean by risk. So these kind of things. I hope you guys have written test also on that particular part. Anyway, there are 2 new points added over here. One new point added in factors increasing the technology risk. There are various factors increasing the technology risk, right? Like for example, there were factors which I said frequent changes in technology, too much of complexity in technology systems. Outsourcing creates some risk to the organization. Outsourcing of the technology creates some risk to the organization. So these kind of factors were there. They added one more new point here now. See, these are all existing points. Multiplicity and complexity of systems, frequent changes in technology, different types of controls required for different systems, social engineering kind of things are being used, proper alignment of business objectives with regulatory requirements is a challenge, dependency on vendors for due to outsourcing of IT services. I told you, income tax department is too much dependent on Infosys today because they outsource the entire IT department maintenance. These are all like various challenges. These are all like various challenges which are there because of technology, because of using technology. This is a topic which they copied from chapter number 5 and pasted over here. We discussed that while discussing. One new addition, very, very small one. Downtime due to technological failure. This is also a challenge because of technology. Information system facilities may become unavailable due to technical problems or equipment failure. A common example of this type failure is non-availability of the system due to server failure. Sometimes it will fail and system will not be available. Entire process will come to a halt. Entire process will come to a halt. So this is one small addition which is there for the technology risk. And ERM. Few lines have been added into the concept called ERM. Now, what do you mean by ERM?
Enterprise resource management, sir.
Hey, ERP is enterprise resource planning. ERM. What do you mean by ERM? SA 315 ERM, enterprise risk management. Enterprise risk management. We
Yes,
saw
sir.
it with an example of hotel. If you remember, we saw it with an example of hotel. What is that particular example? We said, I am going to establish a hotel in Chennai, which will serve millet-based food. Millet-based food. And whether I'll become successful or not, we saw it in various steps. What did I say is, first understand the control environment of the organization. What is my attitude? What is my risk-taking capacity? After understanding those things, establish the vision and mission. Establish the vision and mission. After establishing the vision and mission, identify the events. This is where we started drafting in a table. What are all the reasons because of which my hotel might become a failure? I told fire accident can happen in the hotel. I told competitor can start a similar hotel. I told wastage of resources can happen. I told taste and quality may not come good. So all these are various risks. For all these risks or events, what we did probability analysis and impact analysis. What is the probability of it? And if it happens, what will be the impact on my organization? After analyzing probability and impact, what did I do? I established controls. What did I do? I established controls on that. And controls are nothing but control activities. We prepared a risk response strategy and established control activities on those processes. And we established a communication and information and communication mechanism inside the organization. We established processes for continuously reviewing it. Nana, this entire ERM concept is managing the risk across the entity wide. Across the entity wide, managing the risk is what is referred to as ERM, Enterprise Risk Management. Before to this ERM, we saw in general what are the risks and what are all the controls, but they are random. ERM is a framework which covers organization from starting to the ending, which links the risk management with the strategic management of the organization and ensures that risks are all identified, they are all properly analyzed, proper controls are established, and risk is mitigated or reduced significantly inside the organization. My dear friends, you guys are able to recollect something? In the Mari on pace, I mean, of this nature, we discussed some topic already. Do you guys remember it? That we discussed some topic of this nature?
Yes, sir.
I'm happy that you guys are at least saying yes. Anyway, let's see what are the new points added into the ERM. So this is what is a new point which is added into the ERM. Just to give the context, I gave the introduction as well. ERM provides a framework for risk management, which typically involves identifying the events or circumstances relevant to the organization's objectives, basically identifying the risks and opportunities, assessing them in terms of likelihood and magnitude of impact, determining a response strategy, and monitoring the progress. My dear friends, this is nothing but that statement is nothing but components of ERM. There were 8 components of ERM. I explained you just now, right? First one, understanding the control environment. Second one, understanding the establishing the vision and mission. Third one, identification of events. Fourth one, understanding the likelihood, risk analysis is what we say. Understanding the likelihood or probability or impact. If it happens, what will be the impact? Then fifth step is understanding the, preparing a risk response strategy. Here also we saw 5 T's, if you remember. Can you say me what are the 5 T's? Risk response strategy. Treat, transfer, terminate, tolerate, turn around. These are all 5 T's, risk response strategies. Then based on this, we will prepare control activity. We will establish information and communication flow. Then monitoring. See, 8 steps are there. 8 components of ERM is what we discussed. That 8 components only he explained in the form of definition. By identifying and proactively addressing the risks and opportunities, business enterprises protect and create value for their stakeholders, including owners, employees, customers, regulators, and society overall. If you manage the risk properly, everybody is happy. ERM is a risk-based approach. This is a new point addition. Risk-based approach, which includes methods and processes used by the organization to manage the risks. ERM provides a framework for risk management, which involves this framework. ERM framework involves, or ERM steps involve, identifying the potential threats or risks, determining how big a threat or risk is, what could be its consequence and its impact, implementing controls to mitigate the risks. Implementing controls, this is a new point. Already we discussed this entire concept, but they somehow added this paragraph. So I brought it over here, this paragraph addition as well. So this is second amendment in the textbook. I mean, not a significant new topic as such, but just a few points added into the ERM. Let's go to the third part. In part 3 of the chapter, they have added 4 more sections under Information Technology Act 2000. Nana, if you remember in Information Technology Act, they have given punishments for so many things. For example, they have given punishment already existing sections. They have given punishment for stolen device. They have given punishment for introducing virus or hacking a particular system unauthorizedly. They have given punishment for causing data privacy issues. I mean, I collected the customer data that got leaked. For those kind of things, already punishment. And receiving a stolen device. Okay, the stolen device. Masquerading attacks, like spoofing attack is what we called. Spoofing attacks. For these kind of attacks, already punishments are there. Now with this particular attempt, they added 4 more punishments, 4 more new sections and the punishment under that section. One is section 66F, which is punishment for cyber terrorism, using a computer to create terroristic kind of incidents in India. So that is punishment for cyber terrorism. Section 67, punishment for publishing or transmitting obscene material in electronic form. Obscene material means sexually explicit material, some sort of sexually explicit material. It need not be very sexual, I mean very sexually explicit material, but it will be some sort of material which hurts the privacy of people. I'll say you with example, you will understand. Section 67A, punishment for transmitting or publishing of material containing sexually explicit act. This is also similar, but I'll explain you the difference. Here it is pornography. They are banning publishing or transmitting the pornography. Then section 67B says child pornography, children involved in sexually explicit act, child pornography. So these are 4 sections now. What are the 4 sections? One section is for cyber terrorism. One section is for obscene material. One section is for sexually explicit content, which is pornography and all. Then the 4th one is child pornography. These are the 4 sections which they have introduced. These are offenses. If somebody commits this kind of offense, then there will be a punishment as defined under the act. Let us come to the cyber terrorism. This is like, right, during our final preparation also, it used to be there as in our syllabus, but somehow they removed it later. But now again they brought it. Cyber terrorism, under this section only, they banned all our apps. Which apps? TikTok, and apart from TikTok, they banned some 150 plus apps, right? Something similar to TikTok, they banned some 150 plus apps. IMO, there are so many apps which got banned in that list. You guys have
apps, sir, 150 apps plus, sir.
Yeah, 150 plus apps they have banned, right? All those have been banned under this particular section called as cyber terrorism, section 67. Section 66F, sorry. Section 66F, they are all banned under this act. What does this particular section says? If anybody is either doing or intending to do damage to the critical system inside the India, I mean critical system or critical mechanism inside our country, which will affect unity, integrity, and sovereignty of India, such kind of people will be punished under cyber terrorism. So recently in Bangalore is such a cool city. In Bangalore, what has happened is some guy has posted some pictures in the Facebook, which actually arouse tensions between Hindu-Muslim over there in Bangalore. Overnight, 2,000 people came onto the streets and fighted with each other overnight because of that small post on the Facebook. He is some local councillor or somebody, some idiot over there in Bangalore. He posted some picture online, because of which it created riots between the Hindu and Muslim over there. 2,000 people overnight, they fought with each other. Police people were not able to control the issue at all. Throughout the night, it is exactly like a gang war which is being shown in the films. It happened in that way. And finally, entire night, they broke so many properties, they broke so many glasses over there. And finally, many of them have been arrested. This is not a old incident. People from Bangalore can remember it. Hardly some 3 months or 4 months old incident it is. It became a huge issue at that point of time. Such a cool city, but still this kind of issue happened. Those kind of incidents. Now, Chinese people attacking our income tax department. South African people attacking our defense department. Very recently, defense department system also got hacked. Defense system hacked. Defense system also got hacked. Arrested intruder says China is trying to hack Indian Defense Ministry, something like that. Somebody is trying to hack our defense system. Safety critical systems attacking our power system, power grid, attacking India's power grid and making sure that half of the country doesn't receive the power properly. So those kind of issues are called as issues which will affect sovereignty and integrity of India. Nana, if you attack normal system, for example, if you attack my organization's server, does it affect the unity, integrity, sovereignty of India? If you attack my organization's server, does it affect unity, integrity, and sovereignty of India?
No, sir,
No,
it
sir.
won't affect, sir.
There, if you attack, that is also a crime, but it will be punished under a different section, introducing virus hacking or unauthorizedly accessing a normal system. But whereas if you attack income tax department system, defense system, or banking system, or entire telecom networks, or introducing Pegasus kind of viruses in the Supreme Court judge's phone, something of this nature is like very, very, very serious matter. The punishment for this crime, any guess for the punishment? punishment for this crime is death punishment. Death punishment. You will be imprisoned for a lifetime, or you will be hanged to death. So that is what is the kind of imprisonment extended to life, lifetime imprisonment. Not the death punishment. Death punishment is not there. Ignore. I'm sorry. Only imprisonment to life. I think earlier death punishment was there. That is what I remember. Punishment for cyber terrorism. Punishment for cyber terrorism. Whoever, with the intent to threaten the unity, integrity, security, or sovereignty of India, or to strike terror in the people or any section of the people by denying or causing the denial of access. So, which means Indian Defense Department, the actual military officer is trying to log in, but he is not able to log in. Denial of service attack. Attempting to penetrate into the system unauthorizedly. Defense system, somebody is trying to penetrate into the system, unauthorizedly enter into the system and then capture the data. Introducing any computer contaminant, which means virus, Trojan, worm, etc. into these critical systems, income tax system, etc. into those kind of systems. If you attempt to doing those kind of things, which can cause a death or likely to cause a death or destruction of the property or damages the supplies which are essential to the life, like power, water, these kind of supplies will get hindered. So if you attack those kind of power grids, etc., that is considered to be offensive under this section. Imprisonment will be there for life. Self-explanatory section, but still I am reading it. Knowingly or intentionally penetrates or accesses computer resource without authorization or exceeding the authorized access. Even employee, he has to do certain activities only, but if he exceeds the access and then does something damage to the computer, and by means of such conduct obtains access to critical information, data or computer database that is restricted for the reasons of security of the state or foreign relations. People will be there, right? Either inside people who are employees or somebody like that, they'll have access to so much critical information. If they misutilize that particular information for creating damage between the relationships with another country, they create an information which will damage the relationship between India and America, which will damage the relationship between India and Pakistan. Such kind of material, if they gain access to, and if they unauthorizedly gain access to, and if they publish or transmit, or even if they see that information, then if it is likely to cause injury to the interest of sovereignty and integrity of India, the security of state, friendly relationships with the foreign state, public order, defense or morality, in relation to contempt of court, you are violating the principle established by the court, defamation or incitement to an offense or an advantage of any foreign nation or group of individuals or otherwise commits the cyber terrorism, then it is considered to be a cyber terrorism. Using computer to create damage to the unity, integrity, security, and sovereignty of India is called as cyber terrorism. And for that punishment, whoever commits or conspires to commit cyber terrorism shall be punishable with imprisonment, which may extend to imprisonment for life. This is first section, very clear, cyber terrorism. Second section, obscene material. Third section, sexually explicit content. Fourth section, pornography. Now, the difference between three sections is, see, first section, it may not be very sexually explicit, but inducing a person or blackmailing a person or causing the damage to that particular person by like using his private data, such kind of things. For example, one recent case is there. It has been shown in the movie as well. One recent case, one college girl, what she did is, one college girl, every day she was going to the college. As usual, she was going to college every day. One idiot came and proposed to her. But she rejected. Though she talked with that guy for 2 or 3 days, but she rejected that particular day. She considered he as a good friend. And then she continued to the college and all. She completed the college after 1 or 2 years. Then again, this girl was supposed to get married with another boy. This idiot didn't like that. What he did is, he went and mentioned her phone number and photo, this college girl's phone number and photo in some idiotic websites and all, saying that this girl is a call girl and all these things. He started publishing her name and photo in different websites with the bad intention. Those people and all started calling this girl. With abusing language. I mean, now public will get access to this information, right? Yeah, her phone number as well as her photograph, public will get access. So many bad people, they started calling this girl and then abusing. And after marriage, this led to her divorce. I mean, like without knowing this, her husband also got married, and then after that, he divorced her after knowing this entire incident. Now that college girl, was not aware that who posted that picture there, who mentioned her phone number. That college girl was not at all aware. They went to the cyber department of the police. They raised a complaint. They identified the first source from which this particular thing came onto the internet, and all. After a lot of investigation, they catched this idiot. Then at the time, this college girl recognizes that idiot. This idiot is the one who proposed to her a long back. He was like one of her friends. She didn't even bother about this guy that seriously. But unfortunately, that guy spoiled her life completely. Such kind of acts, obscene material, like somebody's private image. It may not be a sexually explicit image, but sending that which will arouse the people, such kind of acts are like punishable under this particular section 67. Section 67, which causes, like, whoever publishes or transmits or causes to be published or transmitted in electronic form any material which is lascivious or appeals to the pertinent interest or lustful or sexual interest. It may not be very explicit, but if it is even sending a message to a girl on Facebook, or even sending a message to a particular person, an adult joke is also an offense under this section. You may claim that, sir, it is not sexually explicit, but no, even then it is an offense under this particular section. For that, what is the punishment? First time conviction with an imprisonment for a term which may extend to 3 years, and with a fine which may extend to 5 lakhs. 3 years plus 5 lakhs is the punishment first time. If you don't listen, if you repeat the crime again and again, second and subsequent conviction, a term which may extend to 5 years, and with the fine which may extend to 10 lakhs. 5 years plus 10 lakhs. So that is what is the section 67. Section 67A is about purely sexually explicit act. Here, it need not be sexually explicit act, but trying to induce that person or trying to defame that particular person, like, approaching that person with a lustful intent. That kind of things are section 67. Section 67A is purely publishing or transmitting of sexually explicit material. In a simple normal term, it's pornography. If you publish, create or transmit the pornographic material in India, it is absolutely crime under section 67A. You can ask me, sir, there are so many content over there or out there in the internet, pornographic content and all, then how is it legal? It is not legal in India. It is absolutely illegal in India. All those websites are banned completely, but still they are running. They are up and running. All those websites are banned in the country. See, in India, I just gave it as an academic note. This is not from the syllabus, but just I gave it as an academic note because you might get this doubt, right? Like, how come that so much content is available on the internet? Analysis says 40% of the internet content or the data or the bandwidth is being used purely for watching the pornography and all. While watching pornography is not illegal in our country, the curbs are there on its creation, publication, and distribution. Watching is not considered to be a crime, but whereas creation, publication, and distribution is considered to be a crime. So whoever transmits or causes to be published, I think recently some Bollywood actress husband, he's a producer. I think he got booked under this particular case. He induced so many people and then he created the videos of so many people. He transmitted them. He got punished under section 67A. What is the punishment under section 67A? If somebody like publishes the pornographic material, on first conviction with the imprisonment of a term which may extend to 5 years and with the fine which may extend to 10 lakhs. Second punishment with the imprisonment for a term which may extend to 7 years and also fine which may extend to 10 lakhs. So this is what second. This is cyber pornography. Even more serious issue in the country today is child pornography. Even more serious issue in the country today is child pornography, depicting the children in the form of sexual acts, or number two, making friendships with the children online. These children are like, husband and wife, parent, I mean, mother and father, both of them are working. Child is sitting ideally in the home. Online class will be there for 2 or 3 hours. Rest of the time he's spending on the Facebook, Google, etc. He doesn't even know. He or she doesn't even have that sense of sexual acts, etc. They will make friendships with adults or they'll make friendships with another bad child, and then it will lead to some other thing altogether. Or their videos will be taken and published online. So this child pornography is not at all permitted in India, and absolute showing a child on a pornographic website is also absolutely a crime under this act. Nana, this section is even more stricter section. Section 67B is even more stricter than section 67A. In section 67A, at least watching is not a crime. But section 67B, watching is also a crime. Watching is also a crime under section 67B. Punishment for publishing and transmitting of material depicting children in sexually explicit act. You can read this, self-explanatory. Children means less than 18 years of age. Less than 18 years of age. If anybody creates text or digital images, collects, seeks, browses, downloads, even if you browse and download, it is also advertises, promotes, exchange, everything is considered to be offense under this particular section. Somebody, if they facilitate abusing the children online, somebody, if they record in any electronic form, own abuse or that of others pertaining to sexually explicit act with the children, anything with respect to children are absolutely intolerable. This section is common section across the globe. It is not just in India, it is across the globe. The same kind of provisions are there all across the globe. First conviction with an imprisonment for a term which may extend to 5 years and with a fine which may extend to 10 lakhs. Second conviction with an imprisonment with a term which may extend to 7 years and with a fine which may extend to 10 lakh rupees. So this is what is child pornography. Almost punishment remains the same, but here it is even more dangerous section. Even more dangerous. Section 67B is even more serious threat out there in the market. But you can get a doubt, sir, publishing text, publishing images, publishing videos, everything is offense, you are saying, right? On our temples, what do you call Gopram? I don't know what do we call Gopram in English. Temple Gopram and all, there will be idols, right? Idols, which might be like, which might have been like, which might have been sexually explicit content sometimes, but easy to also ban. No, this section explicitly provides it is for protecting the heritage of India and religious sentiment over there. That is explicitly not covered under this section, and it is actually developed with a different intention altogether. Those are developed with a different intention. Let's say MBBS book is there. MBBS book is there where they need to really show, where they need to really depict certain pictures to make the people understand. That is with the real intention. That is with the real good intention. Such kind of things and all are not considered to be offensive under this section. Though there is an image, though there is a video which explicitly provides some sort of information for educational purpose, then at that point of time, that is not considered to be offensive under these sections. So these are the 4 new sections which are introduced, Nana. Very, very important, like, but very easy to remember. Maybe for MCQ purpose or something like that, they might ask you. Let's go to the second chapter. Chapter number 2. In chapter number 2, in the key features of ERP, for data warehousing feature, they have added some additional points for data warehousing. Hey, what do you mean by data warehousing? Nana, what do you mean by data warehousing? Are you guys there?
Historical data.
Historical data.
Historical data.
Okay, you guys are periodically shifting the data. Correct, Nana. What do you mean by data warehousing? Periodically shifting the data from normal database or operational database to historical database for analysis purpose and all. They just explained. Earlier, data warehousing was explained only in chapter number 3. In chapter number 2 also, they introduced a small paragraph. Explain the data warehousing or data repository feature of an ERP system. Data warehouse is a module that can be accessed by an organization's customers, suppliers, and employees. It is a repository of organizations' electronically stored centralized data. Data warehouses are designed to facilitate reporting and analysis. This classic definition of data warehouse focuses on data storage. The process of transforming data into information and making it available to the user in a timely enough manner to make a difference is known as data warehousing. Data warehousing means what? From operational database, move the data into a historical database and use it for reporting and analysis, provide useful insights to the users. That is what they have explained. We saw it in chapter number 3, but now they brought it into chapter number 2 as well. The means to retrieve and analyze data, to extract, transform, and load data are also considered essential components of data warehousing system. ETL tools are considered to be major part of the data warehousing system. Extracting, transforming, and loading tools are major part of data warehousing system. This topic has been just added somewhere in the introduction of ERP in our textbook, so I brought the paragraph. few additions to the role-based access controls. Nana, you remember role-based access controls? I told you, right? Let's say our coaching center develops an ERP system. Our coaching center develops an ERP system. We will divide all the users of this ERP system into various roles. For example, we will divide the roles into various roles like, for example, management will be there, faculty will be there, coordinators will be there, students will be there, parents will be there. All these people are going to use the ERP system of our coaching center. Now, what will happen is, what should be ensured? I mean, this is called role-based access, right? Whenever a new parent is coming, I will provide the role relating to the parent. Whenever a new student is coming, I will provide a role relating to the student. So that way, I will give them the role according to the job designation. Now, there is a small addition over here. They said there are two types of role-based access. There are two types of role-based access, where the first type of role-based access is mandatory access control. The second type of role-based access is discretionary access control. First type is mandatory access control. Second type is discretionary access control. There are two types. In this way, for users, we are providing the roles, right? That is called role-based access controls. Whereas in the role-based access controls, there are two types, Nana, mandatory access control and discretionary access control. Mandatory access control means something which like central department will monitor it. Central department will monitor it. Mandatory access control means central department will be monitoring it. Very, very strict controls if it is there. Then at the time it is called as mandatory access control. Everything is controlled by a central department. They will only think before giving access to each and every person. Then it is called as mandatory access control. Discretionary, for example, in the systems like banking, in the systems like defense, we establish these kind of mandatory access controls. Whereas discretionary access control is something which is like for not very serious data. Owner of that particular data inside the system. For example, I create a sheet, I decide to whom the access can be provided for. For example, let's say I created an Excel sheet. I created a Word document. This is a Word document which I created. Now, once I created this Word document, if I have access to share this Word document with somebody or create access for this Word document with somebody, then it is called discretionary access. It is not such a strict. For example, let's say I wish to share it with this person. I wish to share it with this person. If I click on send, he'll be able to access this document. Such kind of things are called as discretionary access, not very strict. Then owner of the content can decide who has to who has to edit the content, who has to delete the content. Owner itself can decide. Then it is called as discretionary access control. Very serious means mandatory access control. Something which is very common is discretionary. MAC means MAC criteria are defined by the system administrator itself and strictly enforced by the operating system inside the company. They cannot be changed by the end users. Only users or devices with the required information security clearance can access the protected resources. Everybody cannot access them. Only users with approval can access those resources. A central authority regulates the access rights based on multiple levels of security. Example, government systems, military users use MAC methodology. Whereas discretionary access control involves physical or digital measures and is less restrictive than mandatory access, other access control systems, as it offers individuals complete control over the resources they own. The owner of the protected system or resources sets the policies who can access it. For example, I am the owner for this document. Let's say I am the owner of certain documents. So if I am the owner, I can decide who has to edit it, who has to access it. Let me see, is there any other document? So for example, for this document, I am the owner. Now what I can do is, I can decide who has to access this data. I need not go to the central department which is administering the entire technology in our office. I am the owner of this document. A owner in the sense, the creator of the document is called as owner, usually. So I gave access to all these people. I gave access to all these people. For certain people, I gave only commenting access. They can come there and then comment if they have any issue. But for certain people, I have given editing access. For certain people, I have given editing access. For some people, I can give only viewing access as well. For some people, I can give only viewer access. Only viewer access as well. So that is what is referred to as discretionary access control. If I decide instead of central authority, that is discretionary access control. Mandatory access control means enforced into the operating system by a central authority. Very, very difficult or strict control critical systems will be using that mandatory access control mechanism. Fine, Anna. With this, I have completed amendments in 2 chapters. What are the 2 chapters? Chapter number 1 and chapter number 2. What are all the things which we discussed? In chapter number 1, we said what business processes should be automated. What are the challenges involved in BP? In chapter number, in the same chapter, we also saw what are the new provisions under Information Technology Act. New provisions under Information Technology Act. We also saw factors which are one new point into the technology risk, few lines into the ERM. Both of them are nothing significant. Very importantly, what we saw is new sections added into the Information Technology Act offenses. Then thereafter we saw chapter number 2, where one main topic. In key features of ERP, data warehousing has been added, but this we know already. Few additions into the role-based access controls. This is what we saw now. I'll give you 5 minutes of break. That's it. These are the major contents. But anyway, I'll give you 5 minutes of break. We will see the amendments of chapter 3, 4, and 5, and thereafter we will continue with the flowcharts. Just take 5 minutes of break till 8:15, and then we will continue our discussion. Okay, Nana. So, welcome back. My dear friends, we were discussing the amendments in the chapter 1 and chapter 2, which were like decent number of amendments over there. Now we are discussing the amendments of chapter 3, Information System and its components. The part 1 of chapter 3 purely covers about hardware, software, data, network, people, and there is also information system definition. Now what they added is, they added the differences. Already I have given the differences in your book by default itself, but however, they added those differences officially now. First topic which they have introduced newly is information systems model. We'll see what does it mean. Then second topic is differences between RAM and ROM. Third topic is differences between primary memory and secondary memory. Fourth topic is differences between database, data warehouse, and data mining. So these are the 4 topics which they introduced newly. Let us start with the first topic, information system model. Hey, you know what is the definition of information system? Information system means set of components. What are the 5 components of information system? What are the 5 components of information system?
Hardware, software, data, network, people, sir.
Hardware, software, data, network. Correct. These are the 5 components of information system. What are the activities which information system does, Nana? What will the information system do? It will help in collecting, storing, processing, retrieving, distributing the information of an organization. Information system model establishes the relationship between components and activities of the information system. Components and activities of the information system. Basically, what model says is, in a computer, with the help of all the components which are present, we can mainly do 4 activities. One is input, the second one is processing, third one is output, fourth one is feedback. These are the 4 activities which will happen inside an organization. What do you mean by input? Business related data we need to input into the system. What do you mean by processing? We will compare, analyze, aggregate, add, reduce, multiply, something of that nature we will do for producing the useful results. Output is nothing but the output generated out of that particular, like it can be in the form of a graph, it can be in the form of a picture, some output which is generated, which is useful for establishing, taking decisions inside the organization or establishing controls inside the organization. By seeing this output, managers and all will see this output, right? Based on that, they will pass a feedback. Array, you didn't collect this information. Array, this information which is present here is wrong. Array, this information has to be in a different format. Something like that, they will pass a feedback, which will be again considered by the input team while inputting the data into the system. Again, processing will be done. Again, new output will be obtained. Again, feedback will be provided by the people. Again, we will go back to the input. So this input, processing, output, feedback is a mechanism which will keep on happening in any organization with the help of information systems. We will keep doing these 4 activities with the help of information systems. It's a small topic. You ignore that. Let's go to the another topic, differences between RAM and ROM. Anna, I hope you guys remember we discussed all these aspects. There will be a motherboard in the computer. There will be a motherboard in the computer. On the motherboard, CPU will be there. What are the components of CPU? Parts of CPU.
Arithmetic and logical unit, sir. Control unit, sir.
Registers or MU. Correct? These are the 3 components of CPU. Then there will be primary memory and secondary memory is what we discussed. RAM and ROM. This is called as primary memory. Primary memory will contain 2 parts in it. One is RAM, one is ROM. All these things will be present inside the motherboard. Inside the motherboard, CPU can access them directly. Whereas secondary memory will be there, which cannot be accessed by the CPU. It's like external memory or hard disk, or a pen drive, or a CD, which cannot be accessed by the secondary memory directly. Now let's come to the RAM and ROM. We know RAM and ROM, right? RAM contains the files which are currently open. From hard disk, if I click open a particular file or any software, then it will be opening in the RAM. Whereas ROM stands for, what does ROM stand for?
Read-only memory.
Read-only memory prepared by the manufacturer with some amount of data which cannot be changed, which cannot be edited. And RAM and ROM, RAM will be huge size. ROM will be, I told you, 256 MB to approximately 1 GB. Whereas RAM size, usually it comes with 2 GB, 4 GB RAM, 8 GB RAM, 16 GB RAM and all will be there. And contents of RAM will keep changing. Contents of ROM will never change. These kind of things and all we already discussed. Few additions, Nana. In RAM versus ROM, they added these 3 points. Impact of RAM. RAM is volatile memory, such as RAM has high impact on the system's performance. If you open too many contents on the RAM, too many softwares on the RAM, probably performance of the system or fastness of the system will reduce. ROM is non-volatile memory and has no impact on the system performance. Standard data, it won't change at all. It will not impact the system performance. Cost. RAM is costly. ROM is cheaper, but very difficult to replace. Usually we will not replace the ROM at all. But RAM is costly. If you need to replace, already we discussed 8,000 to 10,000 rupees will be the cost of 4 GB to 4 GB to 8 GB RAM. So that way it is costly. Speed of RAM is quite high. So ROM is little slower than RAM. Capacity. RAM is larger in size. ROM is generally small and of low capacity. These 4 points have been added for RAM and ROM. Okay. All topic conceptually we have already discussed. Maybe explicitly points have been added. Then the next difference is between registers and cache memory. Now you remember cache? Here additionally in the processor, there will be one more memory unit called as cache memory unit. What does it do, Nana? What does it do? Cache memory, what does it do?
It will bridge the speed between the
primary memory units and the registers. So it will, correct, Nana. It will bridge the speed between the primary memory unit and registers. So now we're going to see what is the difference between register and cache. Register is the place where actual processing happens. It is inside the CPU, actual processing happens. Cache is just a bridge between the registers and primary memory. Processor registers, which means these registers. These are high-speed memory units, 10 power 17 times in a second. They will change. That is what we discussed. These are high-speed memory units within the CPU for storing small amount of data, like 32 bits and 64 bits, very small. The registers are the only things processors can operate directly. CPU can access directly only the register, which is there within the CPU. Whereas cache memory, it is fast memory built into the computers used to reduce the average time to access the data from the main memory. From accessing something from the primary memory, time will be reduced if cache memory is there. The data that is stored within a cache might be values that have been computed earlier or duplicates of original values that are stored elsewhere. Some values will be stored, intermediate processing results and all will be stored in cache memory, which computer can use it for increasing the speed. Cache memory is an interface between CPU and the main storage. Main storage is nothing but primary memory. Cache memory acts as an interface between both of them. It is not directly accessible for operations. For other like RAM, it won't be directly accessible for the people, or even CPU cannot access the cache memory directly. From cache, contents should get into the registers. Only in the registers, CPU can process the data, or ALU can make the calculation. Cache is just an intermediary storage, that's it. It is not a processing unit. Difference between primary memory and secondary memory. The next aspect is difference between primary memory and secondary memory. Primary memory means RAM and ROM. Secondary memory means hard disk. Primary memory small in size, secondary memory large in size. Primary memory costlier, secondary memory little bit cheaper. CPU can access the primary memory, but cannot access the secondary memory directly. Cannot access the secondary memory. These differences already we are again seeing it. Primary memory is directly accessed by the CPU. Secondary memory is not directly accessible by CPU. Instructions or data to be currently executed or copied in the primary memory. They are explaining RAM. Whereas data to be permanently stored is kept in the secondary memory. Complete data. Even if you shut down the system, secondary memory will be there as it is. Primary memory is volatile. Secondary memory is non-volatile. Volatile, non-volatile, you know. If power is gone, if the data is deleted, then it is volatile memory. Power is gone, data is not deleted, then it is non-volatile memory. Secondary memory is non-volatile. Primary memories are made of semiconductors. This is like technical part. They are made of semiconductors to ensure that speed and accuracy is there. Secondary memories are made of magnetic devices or optical materials. This is just hardware difference between both of them. Accessing the data from primary memory is faster. Accessing the data from secondary memory is slower. The reason is, if anything is already open, system processor can directly access it from RAM. But if something is present in the secondary memory, to open it, first you need to click open, bring it into the RAM, then into the processor. So it will be slow. Primary memory is accessed by using the data bus. Secondary memory is accessed by using the wires or channels. This is one good difference. What do you mean by data bus means? This is all inside that motherboard, right? Inside that green colored motherboard. All these things would have been connected by black or white lines. If you have seen, those are called computer bus. That is technically called as computer bus. This is the motherboard, right? This is the motherboard, right? In the motherboard, here and there lines will be there, Nana. White colored, green colored lines will be there. Those lines are called as computer buses, where communication will happen from this processor to the RAM. Communication will happen from the processor to the RAM by using that computer bus, which is inbuilt into the motherboard. Whereas when it comes to the hard disk, ideally we would have connected it with the normal wire. Normal wire would have been used for connecting the secondary memory. That is also one difference.
Sir, is the buses like some circuit or something, sir?
Bus is also a circuit. That is what. I mean, bus is also a circuit. It is also a communication channel, but embedded into the motherboard is what you can assume. It just appears like a line, not like a physical wire. So that is what is called as data bus. This is primary memory is small in size. Secondary memory 1 TB, 2 TB, 3 TB hard disk is what we will use. Primary memory costlier. Secondary memory cheaper, because 4 GB RAM also will cost you 6,000, 7,000. 1 TB hard disk will also, 1000 GB hard disk will also cost you 3,000. It is RAM is an internal memory. It is there within the motherboard. It is an external memory outside the motherboard. That way, we have differences between primary and secondary memory. That is the next topic. Differences between database, data warehouse, data mining. I don't know why idiotic topics and all are being linked. Simply data is there. That's why there is a new topic which is added for differences and all. Anyway, database is where place we record the actual transactions. Data warehouse is where we will periodically move the data from database to a large database, which is called as data warehouse. We will store this data here for reporting analysis purposes, and to improve the operational database speed, we will store it here. And we will execute some methods on this data warehouse and database to analyze and report, or to extract the hidden trends. That is called as data mining. Data mining is an analysis process. Whereas database and data warehouse is for storage. Database is also for storing the transactions. Data warehouse is also for storing the transactions. Data mining is the activity of analyzing the data to identify some trends. That is what they have explained in the form of differences in this table. Database stores data on the real-time information. Data warehouse stores historical and transaction data. Historical data will be stored in data warehouse. Data mining, this analyzes data to find previously unknown trends. Hidden trends we will identify from this data warehouse. Some example has been given. Database is for recording. Data warehouse is process of extracting the data from data warehouse and storing it in a separate database for analysis and reporting. Data mining is to extract the useful insights from the data. Some examples. Database examples include MySQL, MyAccess. Data warehousing tools include Teradata, Informatica. These are data warehouse modules which are present, or softwares which are present with. These are ETL kind of tools which will help us to construct the data warehouse. For data mining purpose, we use R language. R is also something like Python, which is becoming very popular. R language or Oracle data mining. Oracle also provides some software for data mining. So that way, these are the differences between database, data warehouse, and data mining. Let's go to the next difference. Chapter 4. So chapter 3, very, very small differences. Nothing amended in part 2 and part 3, only in part 1. Chapter 4, e-commerce and m-commerce. Here we saw what are the differences between e-commerce and m-commerce. What are the different models of e-commerce, like e-market, e-shop, e-mall, e-aggregator, e-auction. So these kind of things and all we saw that those are called as what do you call e-commerce business models. Then we also saw something like components of e-commerce. We also saw technological components of e-commerce, guidelines and legal regulations applicable. FEMA Act is applicable for e-commerce, something like that. We discussed FEMA in detail. Traditional and modern digital payment methods. We discussed about UPI. We discussed about USSD banking, Aadhaar enabled payment system. These are all the various topics which are already there. Few amendments here and there, certain points are added. First one, few more differences has been added to traditional commerce versus e-commerce. Already we saw differences. Traditional commerce delivery will happen immediately. E-commerce delivery will happen after a delay. Traditional commerce, people can touch and feel. E-commerce, people cannot touch and feel. Traditional commerce, immediate payment, immediate delivery. E-commerce, it is not possible. Traditional commerce, brick and mortar store is required. E-commerce, website is required. So something of that nature, we saw the differences in traditional commerce versus e-commerce. Approximately 14-15 points are there. Screen to face interface in case of e-commerce, whereas person to person interface in case of traditional commerce. So that way, few more points have been added to explain the difference. Location. Traditional commerce requires a marketplace to operate. Generally, it is preferred to set up the locations where people regularly come, like less competition is there, shopping mall is there, we will go and set up a shop. E-commerce also something similar. It also requires a market space. It is important that website, in internet we need space here. Here we need in a shopping mall, in traditional commerce, here in internet we need a space. It is important that our website should be highly visible and easy to find. Placement of links to the website is an important determinant of traffic. Here and there, in Facebook, we should go and place the links to our website. In LinkedIn, we should go and place links to our website. In WhatsApp, we should go and place the links. In newspaper websites also, we will go and place link to our website. Go and purchase this here. So that way we need to place advertisements here and there, and then we need to ensure that people are coming to our website. That is what we do in e-commerce. In traditional commerce, it is not that way. Size of the store will depend on nature of items, our demand. There are small stores also in case of traditional commerce. There are big supermarkets and big shopping malls as well. Even in e-commerce also same thing. Size of the business model is also influenced by products and customers. Like, how much servers I should purchase, how much network bandwidth I should purchase, storage capacity I need to purchase. It all depends on number of transactions which the e-commerce entity is executing. We are also into e-commerce. Amazon also is into e-commerce. Their systems are very complex and high grade. My systems are very simple and small. Marketing. E-commerce stores have physical presence. So usually the person only will market. And it's a one-way marketing. I have this, please come and buy. I have this, please come and buy. It is a one-way marketing. Whereas in e-commerce, for acquiring the new customer, we need to spend a lot of cost. If you advertise in 30 different places, for us and all, now if you see our CFO, online CFO and all, we spend approximately 6,000 to 7,000 rupees for acquiring each customer. For acquiring each customer, we spend that much amount of money on ads. If you spend that much money, we'll get one customer. So how to invest more money, time and effort to acquire a new customer on e-commerce? Huge competition on internet. They have to advertise their presence more aggressively on the internet. This is also called as one-to-one marketing. Each and every person in a customized way, I keep disclosing the advertisement. Customized way, I keep providing the recommendations. That way it is one-to-one marketing in e-commerce. Small topic. Difference between e-commerce and traditional commerce. Already 14 points are there. Added 3 more points. Okay. Disadvantages of e-commerce. This is a new topic altogether. Already advantages are there. Advantages we saw in 3 categories. Advantages to the customers, advantages to the vendors, advantages to the government. That way we divided it into 3 and then we saw the advantages. Whereas e-commerce disadvantages are also there. What are the disadvantages of running an e-commerce business? We are online CA firm, right? We are facing all these problems. Number 1, internet connection. Majority of the customers in India, a minimum of 50% people in India doesn't have access to the internet. So my market size, though India is 130 crore country, my addressable market is only 40 crore or 50 crore. Rest 70-80 crore people, they don't have access to the internet connection. That is one big challenge for e-commerce businesses to grow. High startup cost. E-commerce business today requires, before you set up hardware, software, data, network, people, like, huge cost is required. I need to create a beautiful website, a mobile app, and in fact, then data warehousing systems and all I need to create. Then setting up a traditional store, setting up an e-commerce store is becoming more and more difficult these days if you want to really scale it up. Legal issues. So many times legal issues are like, when compared to the traditional system, legal issues are more for the e-commerce entities because laws are not very clear in most of the cases. For example, let me say you, Amazon sold one product, iPhone. Whenever Amazon sells, Amazon is not selling it. Some seller on Amazon is selling it. But if that product goes wrong, people will file case on Amazon. Even law is not clear whether it becomes responsibility of Amazon or whether it becomes the responsibility of seller. So this way there are so many legal loopholes which keep creating problems for the e-commerce players all the time. E-commerce legal issues are not so simple. Even privacy, data privacy protection and all are not going to be simple because people will file cases if I don't protect their personal data. That is also a problem. Some business processes may never come into e-commerce. This is also one problem. Some processes will never come into e-commerce. For example, purchase of gold. These days it is happening, but in a very, very limited way. I mean, people believe certain things can never be automated. One such example which they have given is jewelry. But these days, jewelry is also available online. But I think in a very, very, very small volumes. It is very difficult to bring the people because of trust and culture. It is very difficult to bring them online for purchasing these kind of goods. Even perishable goods like vegetables and all. Online establishments are difficult. Yes, there are, but it is still difficult to scale up. Cultural impediments to e-commerce. Some people won't believe Some customers are simply resistant to change. They won't change at all. My father and all, he never likes purchasing on e-commerce website. Yes, he uses internet, he uses WhatsApp, he knows how to purchase on Flipkart as well. Maybe he may not be able to make payment, but at least he can place cash on delivery order. But he never does it. He'll never like it. He'll say there can be fraud, there can be quality issue. He'll never believe it. How much ever I say, I keep receiving so many deliveries every day. Even then he doesn't believe. Even though the price in the e-commerce is lesser than the price at the shop, but still he believes going to the shop and purchasing itself is making more sense. So that way, cultural impediments are there. They won't change. Security concerns are there. One of the biggest challenge for e-commerce entities. There are so many privacy of the data and all are getting leaked, so that people's trust is spoiling day by day. So that way, these are all challenges in running, disadvantages of running the e-commerce business. We are not able to capture the entire market. Some people are not at all changing. Privacy issues are there. Legal risks are there. Internet connection is not available for certain people. So these are all certain issues for challenges for scaling up the e-commerce entity or running the e-commerce business. Let us take up the next model, next question. Different business models in e-commerce. Nana, already we saw B2C business model, B2B business model, C2C business model. B2C is business to consumer. B2B is business to business. C2C is customer to customer. Nana, can you say me one example of B2C model? Any website, e-commerce website, which is example of B2C, a business entity selling to the customers.
Amazon, sir.
Amazon, Flipkart, Ola, Uber, all are B2C. Whereas B2B, business to business, I told you Udaan, I told you Mogilix, these kind of websites, wholesale websites, where you can purchase the items on wholesale. India Mart, all these are wholesale websites. They are B2B. They are connecting wholesale business with the retail business. Both of them are businesses only. There you cannot go and place order for one mouse, one phone, not possible. You have to place bulk orders. Such kind of websites are called as B2B. Mogilix kind of websites. C2C is OLX is a good example. Quicker is a good example for C2C model. Customer and customer will contact and then they'll exchange the goods. Now, other models have also been added. C2G is a new introduction. Okay, C2B is a new introduction. Consumer to business. Consumer approaching the business, not business approaching the consumer. Consumer is approaching the business. These days, there are many websites, right? For example, Policy Bazaar is there. Policy Bazaar. As a customer, I will choose which compare various insurance policies. I will approach the business entity. Please give me this policy. I will ask them, please give me this policy. That is called as C2B, consumer approaching the businesses with the help of e-commerce. In this model, consumers set prices and companies bid to offer products and services. The comparison of interest rates of personal loan. So there is also another example which they have given, bankbazaar.com, where I can compare the interest rates for various loans and I can go and approach whichever is better for me. I mean, whichever bank is providing the best interest rate, I can go and approach that bank. Those kind of models are C2B. Customer will search, compare, will analyze, and will bid for the business. That is called as C2B. Let me go below. Where is it? Chapter number 4. Okay. Next model is C2G, consumer contacting the government and submitting the data. For a good example is e-filing. We are filing income tax returns, we are filing GST returns. It is C2G, customer contacting the government and submitting the customer entering into transactions in an internet with the government for filing of returns, for payment of taxes, etc. Government to consumer. Government is providing certain services by using internet to the consumer. For example, issuing of Aadhaar card, land registration. All these services used to happen manually in a paper form. Today, all these services are happening online. In fact,
Train, sir.
Train ticket is not government to consumer. It is actually business to consumer only, because train ticket is not a government service. It's a business service idea. Anyway, Rana, government to consumer is where things like e-Seva. E-Seva is a concept in Andhra Pradesh where all government services, issuing of Aadhaar card, land registration, marriage certificate registration, birth certificate registration, voter ID registration, whatever it is in this earth. If you want some work from the government, go to this office called eSeva. State government works, not central government. Passport and all, no. Only state government works. You can go to the eSeva and get it done within minutes. Like that is called as government to consumer. A beautiful concept in Andhra Pradesh. Our Chief Minister Chandrababu Naidu designed it. So that's a great concept over there. That is something similar to government to consumer. Government creating the technology for providing better services to the consumers. Business to government. Certain businesses will provide services to the government. Tender websites where businesses will go and make a tender to provide services to the government. For example, there is something called as GEM portal. GEM portal. GEM portal where government will purchase everything from this portal. People will go and bid. Please purchase mine. Please purchase mine. Please purchase mine. Government will decide the better rate and procure it from a good vendor. Those kind of services are called as government to business or business to government services. Business to government services. Or even nsdl.com. For income tax department, this NSDL company is providing services to collect the payment of tax. Hey, today, if you want to make payment of income tax, you should go to this website called as NSDL. This is a government company only, but it is a separate company, an independent company. What it says is, it will help us in making payment of tax, payment of income tax. If I say, it will reach me to a particular website. Even if I go and click the official income tax department website, it will say me to go and pay the taxes over here on the NSDL website. This is the place where I'll pay the taxes and all. So this organization is providing services to the government in the form of collecting the taxes and all. This is called as business to government service. Business to government service. Or even my business, if I am supplying stationery products to the government, if I am supplying, if I am constructing roads for the sake of government, then it is called as my business providing services to the government. If this transaction happens online, filing tender and all, if it happens online, then it is business to government services. That way they have introduced a few more models now into the e-commerce business model, along with B2C, B2B, C2C. These are all the various additions. Then one more topic, latest trends in e-commerce. What are all the latest trends? Anna, nowadays, people are using internet more, web-based systems more or mobile systems more? What are they using more?
Mobile systems, sir.
Hey, mobile or web, what are they using more? Nowadays, e-commerce is becoming popular or m-commerce is becoming popular. How much time are you spending on your desktop every day? How much time are you spending on your mobile phone? Hey, this guy is a different guy. Sadashivam is there, right? Different guy. Always he tends with, he comes up with such kind of answer where Sadashivam, you are really, man, I think you are a unique factor. I mean, like, I'm not saying any, I'm not creating any offense over here, but I'm saying, I think you believe certain things based on what your practice is, I guess. Maybe, anyway. I observed it twice or thrice, Sadashivam, by now. Anyway, nothing wrong. We are seeing latest technologies in e-commerce, latest trends in e-commerce.
Sir.
Solunga.
Second time Hussein said, sir.
Oh, is it so? Second time Hussein said, okay, I'm really sorry, Lana Sadashivam. Hussein, you are also into the same category. Now the number of people in that category are increasing. Anyway, day by day, we are increasing the amount of time which we are spending on mobile phone. Each person on average is spending 3 to 4 hours on mobile phone every day, which is like 20% of active time for a person, or like 50% of active time, 20% of total time. So which is so huge. So the trend is we are moving towards such kind of things. And the e-commerce businesses are using technologies like artificial intelligence. Earlier, if you want to contact a support center, you used to contact manually, calling, pressing 1, 2, 3 and all. Today, interact with RoboChat. I placed an order on Swiggy. I wanted to pass on some instructions to the cook. Please make it a little more spicy. This is an instruction I wanted to pass. Earlier, one support agent I need to call in Swiggy. That support agent will call the restaurant and then speak. Today, once I place the order, if I want to place any instructions, there will be an option, place instructions over there. Then immediately it will ask what kind of assistance, what kind of assistance you need is what Robo will ask. I want to send some instructions to the chef. I'll click that button. Immediately I'll type my instructions. I will send it. So most of the support systems are getting automated in the e-commerce. So such kind of trends. Yeah. Content-based competition is arising. Content-based competition. People are fighting for increasing the customer experience or enhancing the customer experience. Amazon did so much of research on customer experience. Amazon, it went to the rural areas and all. It wanted to analyze why people are not purchasing products in the Amazon, or what challenges are they facing in the rural India. So they understood the search icon is there, right? They are thinking that it is a bat. They didn't know that it is a search icon. They didn't know this icon is a search icon. When they researched, they didn't know that this icon, they identified the fact that people in rural India are not understanding this icon as a search icon. They are understanding it as a bat. They didn't know. This cart is there, right? This cart. They are not understanding the meaning of the cart. For them, bad. They got used to bad. So this cart is not a good thing, is what Amazon analyzed. Amazon changed the websites for rural India for the sake of by removing by observing these kind of insights. Today they have Amazon in Telugu, Amazon in Tamil, Amazon in Kannada. That is also based on the customer insight. Today, content-based game or user experience-based game is increasing a lot. Content. There is a great competition in e-commerce. A visually attractive website and interesting display of products is very, very necessary. And what Amazon observed also, people are seeing the products in Amazon. For watching their video relating to the product, again, they are going back to YouTube. So Amazon decided, no, let us make video here itself, because people are feeling comfortable on a video a lot when compared to the image. So they're getting back into YouTube for accessing the product video. Now Amazon decided, no, let us put our videos here itself. That way they are analyzing the customer behavior to provide better services. I'll close them, otherwise my browser will become very slow. Okay, so attractive, a visually attractive website, interesting display of products on it is not just enough to stand out in the customer's memory. The content of the web should be such way not only attracts the customer attention, but also helps in engaging them. They should spend time on the content of the particular Amazon and all. Latest trend is using the videos for content marketing. Shoppable videos for customers instead of using images is a new trend. Social commerce, advertising on Facebook, Insta influencers are there, WhatsApp influencers are there. This is called as social commerce. Using social media channels or a place where usually social interactions happen. There I am going and advertising the products for making my sales. Social media, like even social commerce include websites like Meesho, where what they are saying, Meesho says, take the photos from my website, send it on all your WhatsApp groups and Insta groups. If the customer places the order, then I will give you a commission. That is what is the concept of Meesho, right? All that is part of social commerce. Social media these days is an integral part of almost every consumer's online habits. The latest trend is the inclusion of e-commerce in social networks such as Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, etc. More and more people these days are using smartphones because of their low cost, low release of data points. Social media platforms offer innovative methods to reach and showcase the best offers. Promotion of products on social media platforms is another trend. Social media is being used. M-commerce, another trend now which we are seeing is M-commerce is becoming very, very popular. 55% of online traffic is generated from mobile devices. So this is also a new trend. They are starting to use biometric authentication. Amazon app, earlier it used to ask a password, PIN and all, right? Even they are permitting the biometric authentication to make sure e-commerce websites are even more and more secure. PIN and password are subject to leakage, whereas biometrics are considered to be even one step ahead in security. So biometrics are being used. They are using artificial intelligence like chatbot, robo chat are being used so that responses are coming to the customers very quickly. Suggestions are coming quickly, responses are coming quickly, customer doubts are clarified very quickly, that kind of things. They are adopting predictive analysis. See, Flipkart, now Diwali is going to come, right? Or like Dasara is going to come. Now itself, Flipkart predicts what customers will buy a lot, and then actually it is stocking up all those goods. We closely track Flipkart. So Flipkart does this particular planning. Now itself, it will predict what will be the demand for iPhone 13. Now itself, it will predict what will be the demand for all the new phones which are released. Now itself, it will predict what will be the demand for washing machines, TVs, and everything. They will target those customers based on the predictive analytics which they have done, and they will reach out to them. For example, one analysis which they recently found is, if a customer is not returning the product, let's assume a product has been reached to the customer, but he didn't return that product. Though it is damaged, he didn't return that product. Now, next time, there are very, very less chances for him to come and place the order online. Though it is because of customer's mistake, he delayed returning the product. For that reason, Amazon rejected the return. Amazon said 30 days or 7 days, whatever is the limit kept, it is expired. Please, we cannot take this product back. Then at that point of time, customer is getting disappointed. He's not coming back again. Such kind of insights are being derived out of data analytics. So they are segmenting the customers into different categories. They are targeting them on the emails and all. So these kind of aspects are happening on the e-commerce. Then next topic is with respect to digital payments. We saw about digital payments already. Digital payments, these are all the modern methods. These are all the traditional methods. UPI, BHIM, IMPS, mobile wallet, AEPS, Aadhaar enabled payment system, unstructured supplementary service data. All these are modern payment methods, modern digital methods. Traditionally, we were using cards and internet banking. See, one confusion is removed now. The confusion which they have removed is, earlier mobile wallets used to be there under modern as well as traditional, but they now changed it completely and they have kept it only in the modern. All this Paytm, SBI Buddy, all these apps will come under modern methods, not under traditional methods anymore. They have introduced 2 more new methods, Nana. One is mobile banking and the other one is cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. They introduced the concept relating to Bitcoin. We will see them. And cards also, they made a small change by dividing the cards into credit card, debit card, smart card. Smart card earlier used to be a one-liner explanation. Now they enhanced or enlarged the explanation a little bit. We will see that. Mobile banking, very, very same like internet banking earlier on the desktop. Today, mobile banking is on the mobile app. They are designing an app. They're asking us to install. From that app, I can log in into my bank website, HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank, Axis Bank. I can log in into the bank's website. I can perform the transactions over there. Mobile banking, very simple, straightforward discussion. Cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is something which is new, which is introduced for the first time in our syllabus. Even I am excited to discuss this. I am not an advocate of Bitcoin, but I believe it will generate a lot of wealth if you invest today, at least in the future. That is what I believe. And I have an investment of approximately 5 to 6 lakhs in the Bitcoins already. And I believe I will increase that investment a little bit as well. I'll maintain at least 20 to 30% of my portfolio in the Bitcoins is what I'm believing. Nana, anybody know what is Bitcoin? Cryptocurrency, one good example is Bitcoin. I'll explain about Bitcoin. That is nothing but cryptocurrency. Anybody knows what is Bitcoin or cryptocurrency?
Yes, sir. That does not have any regulation and it's a digital way of payment system, sir.
Correct, Nana. See,
and the users can't be tracked in it, sir.
Correct. Users can't be tracked is not correct, but users are not regulated correctly. For example, dollar is controlled by Federal Bank of America. Rupee is controlled by Reserve Bank of India. Rupee is controlled by Reserve Bank of India. Japanese yen is controlled by Japanese Central Bank. Japanese Central Bank. That way, each and every currency is controlled by some or the other regulator out there in the world. But the problem with certain countries, or even during Corona, is these regulators decided to print their own money, print more and more money. To distribute the money to the people, they decided to print more and more money. Now, when they start printing more and more money, the real value of money will keep reducing. See, basically, this money is regulated. Always it is in the hands of government. Government, if they want to increase the real value of the money, they can increase. Government, if they want to reduce the real value of the money, they can reduce. So it is being completely controlled by the governments today. But there are certain currencies which are created with the help of technologies, completely digital. There won't be physical note at all. Completely digital. These currencies are digital currencies. They will help us. These currencies will help us in transacting money over the online, that too in a more and more secured way. These currencies are not regulated by anybody. It is regulated with the help of a back-end technology called blockchain technology. this blockchain technology is very interesting. What do you mean by blockchain technologies? Let's assume first transaction over the Bitcoin. I paid some amount of Bitcoins to Sadashivam. A block will be created. Information will be stored in an encrypted format. Information will be stored in an encrypted format. Encrypted means, you know, right? Cryptography, unreadable. Only machine can read that format. Nobody can change it. In that format, a block will be created and information will be stored that Harsha paid some money to Sadashivam. Let's say subsequently Sadashivam paid some money to Ganga. Sadashivam paid some money to Ganga. Another block will get created and a link will be established between these two blocks. If you want to push this transaction forward in the records, it is not possible. In Indian currency, when you are dealing in normal books of accounts and all, you can predate the transaction. In cryptocurrency and all, that is not possible because it uses strong blockchain encryption mechanisms and all. Now again, Ganga transfers this money, let's say, to Hussein. Now Hussein transfers, let's say, this money to our Mr. Raghu or somebody is there, right? Mr. Raghu. That way, all the people got transferred. Everything will get added to block. Nobody can edit that block. And sir, where this block encryption and all is being stored, it is not being stored in one place. It is being stored in various servers, in various crypto exchanges, in various public servers. The same information is being stored. Public systems, it is being stored. And even if you edit it in one place, first of all, impossible to edit. Even if you edit it in one place, it is a public ledger system which has been stored in multiple places. We will not be able to edit in all those places. It almost becomes impossible to edit. The very same kind of technology which is being used for currency transactions, the very same kind of technology is being used for maintaining the land records in Andhra Pradesh. What they are doing is, for each and every transaction on the land, they are creating a block. And they are establishing the connection between previous block. Sometimes MLAs and all, what they will do, MLAs, MPs and all, what they will do, they'll go and influence the registrar office. They'll go and, for example, if they find a land nearby a railway station, very beautiful land, they'll go and then they will create a fake record in the registrar saying that this land has been purchased by MLA's father in 1920. So they'll create this record over there and they will start fighting on the court with the original owner. With their influence, they will capture that land. This is called kabja in Telugu, but like, you know, you will indirectly capture that particular land, right? To avoid that, what they are doing is, to properly record land transactions, they are creating a blockchain technology. There are so many uses of blockchain. One good use is cryptocurrencies. In an encrypted format, we will store the information relating to the cryptos and we will keep exchanging the data accordingly. Whether this will become very popular? Yes, this will become very popular. But for now, volatility is very, very high. One Bitcoin, if it costs today 10 lakh rupees, by tomorrow it would have costed 30 lakh rupees. By day after tomorrow, it might cost you 1 lakh. So inflation, I mean, like the fluctuations are very, very high. But even still, if you are considering, like, you know, investing in a different alternate asset class, then cryptocurrency is a good asset. You can go and invest some amount of money in cryptocurrency as well. Where do you want when I invest? I invest through this platform called as Vault. Vault. There is Vault, man. Yeah, Bitcoin Vault. So I invest in this particular platform called as Vault, but you can also consider like various other options to invest the Bitcoins. Anyway, it will be there in the digital format. You can never get Bitcoin means don't assume it will appear like a gold coin. It is just a digital currency. Cryptocurrency is another electronic payment method that is steadily growing popular. Cryptocurrency is a digital currency produced by a public network rather than any government. No government is there behind cryptocurrency. To ensure that payments are sent and received seamless or safely. Cryptocurrency is a medium of exchange wherein records of individual coin ownership are stored in computerized databases using cryptography. Who owns how much amount of cryptocurrency is stored in an encrypted format, in an encrypted way. Cryptocurrency is called so because the data is ensured with strong cryptography. I mean, in encrypted format, cryptography means encryption. In encrypted format, they are storing this entire data. This strong cryptography makes it impossible to counterfeit or double spend. I mean, same Bitcoin spending 2 times or duplicating. For a currency note, you can generate a duplicate note. For Bitcoin, you cannot generate a Bitcoin duplicate. Cryptocurrency is completely decentralized, which means there are no servers involved and no central controlling authority. It's a public ledger system. In many computers, it is distributed and then stored the data. Cryptocurrency is a digital money, which does not involve a physical coin or a physical note. It will not be there. Since it is all online, user can transfer cryptocurrency to someone without going to the bank. Use a mobile phone, use a website, and then transfer. It can be used for making quick payments without transaction fees. Without any transaction fees, you can make the payment. For currency conversion and all, always transaction fees will be there, right? For cryptocurrency, there is no transaction fees. Cryptocurrency is stored in a digital wallet, either on a computer or on any other hardware. But it is not stored physically with you, not in your pocket physically, not in your bank locker. The first cryptocurrency was Bitcoin, introduced in 2009, which is 12 years back. And in 2010, if you have invested 1 lakh into cryptocurrency, 1 lakh into Bitcoin back then in 2010, when nobody believed Bitcoin, can you imagine what will be its value by 2021? Any guess? 1 lakh if I have invested in 2010 in Bitcoin, what do you think will be the value by 2021? Any guess?
More than 100 crores, sir.
It is approx 500 crores. It is approx 500 crores in today's terms. 1 Bitcoin, I mean 1 lakh rupees Bitcoins, if you have purchased in 2010, it is equivalent to 500 crores today. But don't think this as an example and go and invest your money into Bitcoins immediately by believing in me. What I'm trying to say is, it's better to invest if you are okay to lose money. For me, even if I lose that 5 lakhs, nothing will make change in my life. My house will be there, my car will be there, everything will be there as it is. Nothing will change even if I lose that 5 lakhs. If you have such kind of excess money, go and invest in it. So that is cryptocurrency, was Bitcoin introduced in 2009. The other cryptocurrencies, today thousands of cryptocurrencies are there. Some popular one is Ethereum. Ethereum is popular. Libra by Facebook is little popular. Chinese guys have introduced one new cryptocurrency. India is considering a cryptocurrency. Indian cryptocurrency, Indian rupee crypto. The RBI is considering one new Indian rupee. So that is also coming out into the picture. They named it as well. I forgot the name. Litecoin, Peercoin, Namecoin. So many idiotic coins are there today.
Dogecoin, sir.
Dogecoin, yes. So that way there are so many things, but don't consider all of them. If you are trying to invest or if your parents are trying to invest, for now it is better to invest in Bitcoin. Okay, Rana. Smart card alone I will complete and then I will leave for the day. Then tomorrow we will discuss the other new amendments. Nana. So anyway, flowchart is there. I'm really sorry. I'm extending class by one day every day. But tomorrow is going to be the last class for sure. There is no doubt in it because hardly 3 pages left over, 3 flowcharts are left over. So we will discuss tomorrow and then we will close the session. Let us not rush up because amendments, right? There is high chance that questions might come from here. So I don't want to rush the syllabus. So we will discuss tomorrow and close this particular amendments and flowcharts. Thank you very much. Let me not complete this as well. Smart card also, we have a little bit of discussion to make. So we will do it tomorrow itself. Thank you very much. Tomorrow's class is the last class. At any cost. Fine, Nana. Thank you. If you guys have any doubts, I'll wait. Otherwise, we can conclude.
Sir, this amendments material, sir.
I will upload now itself. Now. In next 5 to 10 minutes, I'll upload it on the blog. You can go to the blog itself and then download. techieca.blogspot.com.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks.